you don't want to be read as a virgin, but you don't want to be read as a slut either, because both of them are kind of social suicide.
So, Beth, welcome to Audible.
Thanks.
I'm so excited to talk about your book, Sluts. So to start with, tell me what counts as slut-shaming?
Oh my God, a lot of things. I mean, there's the really, really obvious stuff, like being called a slut or one of its many like equally horrible synonyms, slag, etc. But it can be a lot less on the nose than that. Like kind of like how it's inherently bad, apparently, to be in a situationship or any kind of like casual dating, casual sex situation, and that your like self-worth is clearly being demonstrated or lack thereof. Rules about not having sex until a certain amount of dates, things like that. I think it's something every like woman and marginalised person will have come into contact with at some point in their life.
And how young does it start?
Most people hear the word slut or read it on the internet, I think, by the time that they're 11,
Right.
which is really horrible. In terms of like literal slut shaming, I think because it has such a like wide definition, like we were just saying, it's hard to like concretely put into stats, but most people experience some kind of slut shaming in their adolescence, which I guess is like 11 to 16. But considering that internet statistic, I think most of us are experiencing it before that.
Yeah. So who's doing the slut shaming of those young people? Is it also young people?
Yes, but lots of other people as well. So I think typically people do see slut shaming as like a kind of girl on girl crime that happens in your teens. That's one example of it. But a lot of people experience slut shaming for the first time in their own homes. For a lot of people, their parents are their first ever slut shamer, or a teacher. I had a teacher slut shame me, and that was one of the like biggest moments of slut shaming I remember happening like first. It happens from boys and girls. Girls are pretty bad, especially in teenage years, at doing it to each other, but it comes from boys as well, especially all that kind of rule setting stuff about what's slutty and what's not, and what's acceptable and what's not. So it comes from people of all ages, really. And then I think people make the mistake of thinking it's a uniquely school thing, like it happens in a vacuum when you're a teen, but it really doesn't. It just becomes more subtle, I think, because teenagers aren't subtle and they're being nasty to one another. I certainly wasn't. But when you leave school, it actually follows you. I just don't think we're necessarily as good at recognising it. So things like, you know, I had someone complain about me in the workplace for my outfit, and they literally used the word too promiscuous for the workplace. And it was so ridiculous. It was that like H&M leopard wrap that everybody had a couple of years ago. You know it because every woman knows it. So it was just such a ridiculous situation, but that was an example of like adult slut shaming. And, you know, I've had people in the pub judge me for my job because I'm a sex journalist. And when people hear that, sometimes they assume it's smut, which would be fine, but it isn't. And then they'll immediately ask my husband how he feels about my career, as if it's got anything to do with him at all. Which is, another example of it happening in adult life as well. So I don't think there's an age attached to slut shaming, really.
And where do we all learn this? I mean, obviously it's a societal thing, but if kids are learning it when they're young, if, you know, parents, sometimes the first time a child is slut shamed, it's from them, where are we all learning that this is behaviour to repeat?
Yeah, it essentially comes from our gender roles. That's where it begins. It begins with patriarchy. So when we grow up and we're picking up on our gender roles, which we learn through all manner of places, our parents, schools, the toys we play with, our siblings, basically everything we interact with, media, everything tells us about how we're supposed to act according to our like assigned gender when we're children. This is something I was learning about a lot when I was writing Sluts, and it sounds really, really gross at first, but we essentially learn what the rules are for sex when we're kids, playing, which sounds gross, but sex is how adults play, so it makes sense in terms of a like transference. So lots and lots of like psychologists and sociologists and like sexologists have done loads of amazing work like looking at this specific transition. But essentially when you're a girl and you're a kid, you learn that boys are allowed to be messy and abundant and greedy and like take up space and be loud and basically do whatever they want, like Loki. And girls are encouraged to do the opposite, take up as little space as possible, be quiet, and especially not be messy. And obviously when we become adults, there's this idea that having loads of sex, like casually or thoughtlessly, supposedly, that's like considered like a male trait. And it starts way back then when we're playing, when we're kids, and then we just kind of bring it with us. And then obviously if you have parents or any family members or teachers who align with this thinking, they're going to reinforce it. So, you know, I've heard of people picking up on slut-shaming ideas in their sex education classrooms. Parents, you know, telling you how to dress and telling you that certain things will happen to you if you dress in a certain way, and that would be your fault if so. There are just so many different directions that we get this message given to us from that it's not surprising that most of us grow up with it.
And so we know that girls and women are subject to this, but are men subject to slut-shaming too?
Yeah, of course. It's just not like systemic in the same way. It's not deeply embedded, and it's not like because they're men, if that makes sense. Like I knew when I was writing the gender chapter of my book, like I could already hear the screams of like, but I've been slut-shamed and I'm a man. And like, yeah, that is a problem. I think that comes up a lot. I wrote something recently about masturbation in men and how they're like less encouraged to use toys and stuff because it's considered seedy and gross and a bit like guy living in his mum's basement sort of stigma. And that is a version of male slut-shaming. We also know that black men have a lot of slut-shaming stigma attached to them. There's plenty of research out there to show that people read black men automatically as promiscuous, which is awful. But men won't automatically be victims of slut-shaming. It's more like individual. It's still a very gendered thing, I think, slut-shaming, regardless of who is suffering from it individually. We also know that like in the gay community, gay men are really, really subject to slut-shaming as well.
And so on the other side of slut-shaming, there is kind of this can't win situation because there's also prude-shaming. So what is that?
So prude-shaming is exactly what it sounds like, shaming someone for being a prude. A lot of the time it's shaming someone for being a virgin, which isn't real, like more specifically. And that's something that I experienced. I was prude-shamed. I would say bullied for being a prude. And I was about 11 or 12 when this was happening as well, which is horrifying because, you know, 11 and 12-year-olds shouldn't be having sex. But as soon as I did have sex, it immediately switched. And I started seeing myself on like slut lists that were being sent around the school, or like sexual rumours being spread about me on those early internet platforms that shouldn't have existed, like Ask FM and Formspring and stuff, like anonymous chat boards. So it's just this impossible line that women have to tread, and they're being led into a trap, really, because it's not possible. You can't have the perfect amount of sex with the perfect amount of people to be scathed from either side, but you're still made to try, which is the horrible thing about it. Just culturally, we all learn at a particular age, and I guess it's when we come of age and start being aware of sex, that you don't want to be read as a virgin, but you don't want to be read as a slut either, because both of them are kind of social suicide.
And you write in the book that the phrase like losing your virginity, like there's a problem with that phrase. So what is the problem there?
Well, the main problem is that virginity is a social construct. So you're being made to put this thing on a pedestal. The concept of virginity comes from like evangelical communities, but is now a huge part of mainstream culture and now doesn't really feel that religious at all. I mean, we all use those phrases. I've seen celebrities in podcasts recently or in their books talking about when they lost their virginity and stuff. But virginity doesn't exist. There is nothing about you that changes after you have sex. I mean, there are all these lies out there that tell us you can tell the difference between a virgin and a non-virgin because of things like the hymen or tightness or looseness or their behaviour, all these different features. None of that is true. You're exactly the same person as you were before having sex when you have it. The issue with specifically like losing your virginity or virginity loss is associating sex with loss. When you have sex for the first time, that should only ever feel like a gain. It should feel like you're experiencing something new, that you're doing something you want to be doing. And that should be exciting and celebratory, not a loss. It's no surprise that women think that they're devalued if we call it a loss.
Do you think it's the same loss for men? I almost feel as that like loss is societally like celebrated.
Yeah, I mean, they still call it loss, don't they? I think most of the men that I know would still call it like when I lost my virginity. But I don't think they feel as much like they've lost something when it happens. I mean, I mean, they're going to be really annoyed at me if they recognise themselves in this, but I remember one of my friends telling me at school that he was desperate to lose his virginity and that it was clinging to him like a lost dog. So I was, I mean, we have films like American Pie that are completely based around guys being desperate to get rid of their virginity ASAP, and in-betweeners as well, because I think for boys, the idea of going to university or like just getting past the age of school and still being virgins is horrifying. I think it's weirdly the opposite, where being a virgin or not having much sexual activity is social suicide for men, but it's flipped for girls.
Yeah, like different pressures on both sides in that particular scenario.
For sure.
Yeah. And with the prude-shaming, you write that Muslim women can experience this a lot more regardless of, as you said earlier, what they are or are not doing or how they're actually living their lives. How does that play out, and why is that particularly the case in Muslim communities?
I talk to Shahed in my book, who is the author of a book exploring feminism in Islam. And she puts it, because of the modesty stuff with Islam, like the dressings and the rules around modesty, it creates this really gross, like, forbidden fruit thing.
Right.
With men. So because they're like off the table, they're going to sexualize them even more. Just such a gross concept, but it's very, very real. Something that a lot of Muslim women unfortunately have to deal with. I mean, quite recently there was a viral TikTok where there was just a Muslim girl going about her business in a burqa, and people were shouting at her to like get her ankles out and get this out, get that out, and like sexualizing her but also laughing at her at the same time. So prude shaming comes with a whole host of other problems and racism and really intense sexualization and targeting when you're in the Muslim community.
And you also write about the racism that black women experience alongside slut-shaming and how that can go into the realms of dehumanization. So can you explain a bit about that as well?
Yeah, I spoke to loads of women of colour who just feel like when they're out in public, they almost need to represent their race and therefore can't be seen as sexual because they don't want the responsibility of white people seeing black people, for instance, as sexual because they saw this one girl doing this one thing. Nobody sees a white girl being sexual in a bar and thinks, oh, God, all white women are like this. But people do stereotype women of colour, so it's not the same experience that we're navigating. It's this, I guess, hierarchy where two different systems that oppress you are overlapping. They're going to be victims of slut-shaming that's based on misogyny and slut-shaming that's based on race. So.
Yeah. And you write about the kind of the origin of the word slut. So what did slut originally mean?
Way back in the day, it meant poor woman, which I think is very telling, especially when it comes to like what I explore in the social class chapter. And then it meant like a slovenly woman, and then a bad housekeeper, and someone with an untidy house, and then a promiscuous woman. So I'm a slut in every sense of the word because I have a very untidy house and I'm poor. And yeah, I don't mind sex.
I kind of love that evolution from that last bit, from sort of like bad housekeeper to like, you know, promiscuous woman. It's almost like someone couldn't wrap their head around how you could possibly not be able to keep your house nice. What could you be doing? You must be having sex with your time.
Yeah, you must be so busy shagging around the whole town that you haven't picked up any of your crap. Yeah, maybe that's where it came from, because when I was researching, I actually thought that was a massive jump. But maybe you're onto something, that they were just trying to figure out what on earth could have kept this woman so busy that she didn't have time to be tidying up and making bread. Yeah, you might be right. But interestingly, there's a part in the book where we look at what slut means like across the world as well, like what people's different words for slut are in different countries and the etymologies of those words. The poor thing and the dirty thing comes up in like most countries. In some countries, slut literally translates to like old rag or like dirty rag that needs throwing away and stuff like that. So it really was all about poorness and like this filthiness for a really long time.
And how does that play out now with class and slut shaming in the UK?
I mean, there's a part in the book where I talk about how I joined a few different like child free by choice communities, because I'm just not 100% sure if I want kids. So I wanted to join these communities and see like what the deal was for these women that have made this decision. And when I joined it, and this was only in 2023, so last year, there was so much classist slut shaming in there, like that I had to leave these groups. I mean, these groups were like 37,000 members strong, and it was like rife. It wasn't just like the odd person making classist assumptions or comments. It was everybody kind of ganging together and making these really, really odd threads about working class or lower class women. It was all based around this idea that like council house women have a lot of kids and then live off of the state and have children off of various men, and then supposedly steal your money because you're a taxpayer and they're not, and all of that. It all comes back to really gross wealth hoarding and class gaps. I think it's really unique in the UK because we have such a weird class system here. Like if you ever speak to any like mainland European person who's moved here about the class like stuff in the UK, they're always like, what the fuck is happening? They're always like really finding it bizarre, like how obsessed British people are with class, and how like the disparity between the class gaps is just quite large compared to other like developed countries. It's so mad because if you look at headlines that used to exist in the early noughties about supposed like benefit bashers and in the tabloids and stuff, and then you look at ones from recent years, they're the same.
Right.
Nothing's changed in like 25 years. Like it's still the same gross ideas about poor women sleeping around. There's still these gross myths about poor women sleeping around with richer men as a way to get ahead, trying to entrap those men into pregnancies as like some sort of social mobility method. So I think because we have such a strong classism here, which is strong's a weird choice of words because it's not a positive thing, it means that our slut shaming is still really, really bad because we have all these assumptions about working class people, especially women. And we see it in the media as well. You know, if you look at Maeve's treatment in Sex Education, which is a really recent show, she is a victim of uniquely classist slut shaming. People slut shame her and make comments about her living situation and how she can't afford shampoo and things like that in the same sentence. And it's just not something we see on any other character who's in a better socioeconomic situation than she is.
And slut shaming is a problem in terms of how it affects the actual sex that we're having. So how does that kind of societal, what is currently like a baseline of slut shaming, affect the sex we have?
So slut shaming can really affect the pleasure that we experience during sex. If you grow up being slut shamed left, right and centre in all these different ways that we've talked about, whether it's at school, from your friends, from your family, just things you've picked up from the media, it can put you off of self-exploration, whether that's literal, like solo sex or masturbation, or just exploring things with a partner. And that just limits your like kind of view on what's out there. sex-wise. I mean, I've interviewed women who don't want to do certain sex acts because they think they're sluttier than others. So like anal sex or blowjobs. I've not wanted to go anywhere near them, not because they're not interested, but because they think they'll be shamed by other people. So they're missing out on potentially something that could work really well for them. We don't know that those women wouldn't try those things and go, yep, this is for me. But they're prohibited because of this fear of being slut-shamed. Or I've also spoken to lots of women who don't masturbate because when they were at school, there was this just big culture for shaming girls who masturbate, and that was in my school as well. And I still know girls who are like 30 and have still never tried it because it was just so frowned upon. And that means that they don't know anything about their self-pleasure and what works for them. And that makes it harder to communicate with a sexual partner what you want, because that's something that's proven over and over again in studies, that the more you masturbate, the more you know about yourself and the better you are at having partnered sex as well. There's also this side to it where slut-shaming can actually cause sexual dysfunctions, which I didn't know before researching the book. And it horrified me so much that I drove to my mum's just to tell her about it. She got that a lot throughout the writing process. So yeah, I spoke to one sex therapist who told me this, and then it shocked me so much that I had like 10 more verify it. And then it ended up kind of changing the book in a way because it was such a horrible but important thing for us to talk about, which is that our brains are just data collectors. That's essentially what they are. It's like a filing cabinet of everything we've learned. Sometimes it makes mistakes. That's why things like PTSD exists, because it's been like incorrectly filed in a way. You can have sex and your brain can go, well, weren't we told in 2006 or something that this was bad? And have a physical response because your brain communicates with your genitals via your spine. So it can actually have like a physical barrier and cause things like erectile dysfunction, vaginismus or its symptoms, dryness. All of that can be caused by slut-shaming, technically. It doesn't mean that if you're experiencing these things, it is from that, but it's a potential cause. And I just find that so horrifying.
Yeah. And the seriousness of it doesn't end there, because it also, slut-shaming can affect rape convictions. And we know that rape convictions are incredibly, incredibly low in this country. So how does it play into if someone is actually convicted of rape?
There's a bunch of what we call rape myths that happen in rape trials, but also just culturally with rape, regardless of whether it moves through the court system or not, where these rape myths are essentially things that unfortunately most people believe and have normalised. So a big one is alcohol having some sort of impact on whether or not we feel sympathy for a victim. It's like kind of proven that if a rape victim is smashed when it happens, then she's likely to receive less empathy. Another one is clothing, and another one is previous sexual history. So when I was researching the book, I spoke to a couple of judges and a court reporter and a few other experts who work in this space. And slut-shaming, but that's not what they call it, is such a unbelievably pervasive problem in the court system, particularly when it comes to rape and sexual assault trials. Defence lawyers use it as a tactic for getting perpetrators off. It's one of their first ports of call, is to interview around asking about the victim's previous sex life. That's almost an official part of being a defence lawyer at this point. I've spoken to victims who've had their exes called to ask about the kind of sex that they're into. I've spoken to people who've just not bothered calling the police at all because they're into BDSM and they're like, I know exactly how this is going to go. If you have a colourful sex life as a rape victim, that's just going to get dragged out in the courtroom and picked to pieces. And yeah, it's now considered one of these kind of official rape myths that causes a problem with the conviction rate in this country, which, like you said, is just unbelievably low. that some, Scotland are trialling juryless trials because of these rape myths, including the slut-shaming one, not only, but including it. Because they say too many jury members are coming into these courtrooms with preconceived notions about what makes a good or bad victim. And one of those things is being a slut, essentially.
Yeah.
It's dark.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And you've spent a lot of time, researching and diving into this book now. But where did it start? When were you like, I want to write a book about sluts?
It kind of came about, weirdly, the book sort of started with the class chapter, so it was going to be a different book about like where class and sex intersect, but it's too niche. So that was kind of reimagined into what Sluts is now, because I've been reporting in the sex and relationships space for like 6-7 years now, I think. And just no matter what I was reporting on, slut-shaming came up somewhere and it's like this thing that just snakes its way into every story. So there was a clear need to address this.
Yeah.
I've also been witnessing this kind of resurgence in slut-shaming in the last 2 years, maybe. I mean, I'm hesitant to say it ever really went away because it didn't. But if we look at the early noughties sort of lad mag culture, slut-shaming was really on the nose back then. And then I think it didn't go away, but people felt like they had to be more subtle about it, at least. But that's starting to go again. And I think it's with the rise of men's rights activists and incels and meninists or alpha males or whatever they're called at the moment. The Andrew Tates and the minions that follow have brought back slut-shaming in this really, really big way, particularly online. I think it's hard, especially on TikTok, to go a few posts without seeing something really brazenly slut-shaming. So it felt like the right time to bring it back up again, because I think we're headed to quite a disappointing space when it comes to slut-shaming.
And what was it like to narrate the audiobook?
So weird. So weird. You can hear yourself the whole time. But it was actually really, really fun. I whizzed through it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I was apparently really fast, so I picked up a new skill that I didn't know that I had.
Love it.
But yeah, it was so much fun. I also found out something really gross that I've been telling everybody, that if you have milk before you do any production thing, the producer can hear the milk in your mouth.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, it's awful.
It's the worst thing anyone's ever said to me.
You can sort of counteract it if you go from milk to sour green apple.
Oh, okay.
So if anyone ever makes the mistake, is already in and made it, eat an apple, takes a lot of it away.
That's a fun hack. We just did it with water, but I'll let Penguin know. But yeah, it's the worst thing I've ever heard is someone telling me that they can hear the milk in my mouth.
And on that incredible note, Beth.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.